Is it possible to do tshuva for unknown sins? Of course. But it's not the same as doing tshuva for known sins. One of the aspects of tshuva, let me start with this. There's two tshuvas, okay? There's the lower tshuva and the higher tshuva. There's a very basic difference between the lower tshuva and the higher tshuva. The lower tshuva is about sin. I did something wrong, and I blemished my soul. I brought a pagam into my nefesh, which means practically I desensitized myself. When people do avedas, especially if they do them repeatedly, they lose control over themselves. It's called bad habits. And in an extreme case, it's called addiction. People who are in that condition are slaves to their weaknesses, and that's the lingering effect of a sin. And tshuva is the reversal of that. Tshuva is to gain that sensitivity back. That's called the lower tshuva. The higher tshuva is to return to God, to strengthen our connection to God, to Hashem. And the idea, of course, is that when one has a strong connection to their Creator, the likelihood of them doing something which is against His wishes is reduced. So the higher tshuva is not about sin at all. It's about a relationship with Hashem. And the lower tshuva is about sin. So first of all, when you ask the question, can a person do tshuva for unknown sins? The higher tshuva has nothing to do with sin. It's simply about the idea of a person focusing on their relationship with Hashem, strengthening it, enhancing it, focusing on it. That can certainly be done. But even the lower tshuva, as far as sins are concerned, you have such a concept. It seems to be the implication of Tanya chapter 29. When people find themselves weak and vulnerable spiritually, there's always a cause. And sometimes the cause has to do with sin. I may have committed it a year ago, I may have committed it 20 years ago. In some cases, I may have even committed it as a child. That although children are not held accountable for their sins, there's no punishment. But the desensitization effect of a sin, the idea of vaynesechem mavdilim beinechem lebein elokechem, which means the idea that when somebody does something wrong, they weaken their own will and their own focus, and later on they have a difficulty harnessing their will and their focus because the ills of the past make them ill. The way I teach it to my students, there's a difference between a sin and a sinner. A sin is a bad thing. A sinner is what the bad thing did to the person. It stole some of his soul and some of his will. So when a person finds himself vulnerable and weak spiritually, and without will, without sufficient will, and doesn't know why, they do tshuva, quote, for no particular sin. And this is even the lower tshuva. In other words, they're doing tshuva to cleanse themselves from weakness, although they don't know what the particular cause of the weakness is. So the way you would do that, of course, is you would identify the areas of weakness in your life, the things in your life that you're weak about, and you would resolve to strengthen yourself through discipline, through good habits, through support, which is really what tshuva is all about. The most important thing in tshuva is not correcting the past, it's not repeating it, it's going forward. And so you would do that even if you're not aware specifically of what ill brought on this diminution and this weakness. I do want to add, however, that according to Jewish law, one of the components of tshuva is called vidah, confession. The laws of confession are that sins between man and God, you have to confess in private. Nobody's allowed to hear them. Sins between man and man, you have to confess to the person to whom you sinned. Sins between man and God have to be done silently, and they have to be done specifically. So you're missing something if you don't know what sin you committed. There's in Sfarim, I'm not fully versed in this, but the Sfarim speak about people who have done sins between man and fellow, and they're not sure who they wronged, that they give tzedakah to certain causes that are communal, that everybody benefits from, so that the person whom they hurt would also gain, and that would also constitute some kind of an act of tshuva.